This year, Hurricane Week is going to progress slightly differently than what you're used to. Throughout the week, we're going to be going chronologically from the first storm to the last, and then on Saturday, you'll get the chance, along with everyone else, to vote for which one of the 100 is your favourite. Beginning with one of India's worst storms in recent years, the Odisha cyclone of 1999. And it began life just west of Thailand, and then continued off towards the northwest, eventually becoming a Category 5 cyclone. What made this storm even worse than what it would normally have been after that Category 5 landfall is that it stalled as a Category 4, weakening, and then still a cyclone. It probably maintained cyclone intensity for a day while stalling inland before moving out sheepishly as a tropical storm and then moving off to the south as a tropical depression as we entered November. The Odisha cyclone was one of the most intense cyclones in the North Indian Ocean, the second most intense actually by our records, with a 160 mile an hour peak, Category 5 of course. But what's worse is that it caused nearly 10,000 fatalities. 9,843 is the total that's believed to be true, somewhere around there in any case. $4.5 billion of damages and nearly 300,000 buildings destroyed. Those are people's lives being shattered there.
Tropical Storm Allison of 2001 was a tropical storm that absolutely devastated southeast Texas in June of 2001. It was one of two tropical storms that were retired without ever reaching hurricane status, the other one being Erica of 2015. Allison was a relatively weak system as it moved into the Texas coastline in early June, but once it was downgraded to a remnant low, it made a loop over southeast Texas and dropped incredible amounts of rain in the Houston area, up to 35 inches or maybe even a little bit more than that in some areas. The storm is responsible for $9 billion in damage, particularly in the Houston area, as well as 41 direct fatalities. After Texas, the system moved into the Gulf Coast as a subtropical storm, and then all the way into the mid-Atlantic and northeast as still a subtropical system, or eventually an extratropical system, dumping more rain along the way. But this storm will always be remembered for its impacts in South Texas primarily.
Goes to show you don't need the strongest storm in the world to create unworldly damage like this, and problems in Texas in particular, also into Louisiana and beyond. 60 miles an hour only was its peak, a pressure of 1,000 millibars. It's amongst the weakest storms that we've got on Hurricane Week this year. 55 fatalities in all, as you heard, and $9 billion in damages, and over 77,000 buildings damaged or destroyed, mainly due to these floodwaters. Well, one of the classics, Hurricane Isabel, a storm that looked remarkably pretty during its peak days, and it was near its peak for a very long time. There it is, and had a huge eye at one point too. There it is, then shrinking again. And still remained strong all the way to the northwest, but was not quite as strong by the time it did arrive in the Virginia area. And then after making landfall, it caused lots and lots of flooding problems, as I'm sure many of us are well aware. There it is near its peak though. It was a beautiful storm around then, and there's a video of it too.
Unfortunately, the bat probe isn't doing too well with the rain everywhere. It's kind of hard to find a clear spot today. So we're a lot more wet.
It's not very often you get to see what recon get to see at the nose of the plane, but they did do that during Isabel, and that's what it looked like near the surface, with the waves there looking very treacherous indeed. And that's what it looked like inside Isabel. Well, we have some more pictures coming up of what it looked like inside the eye. There's one. I like that picture. The storm, of course, peaking with winds of 165 miles an hour, pressure of 915, 51 fatalities occurring in all, and $5.3 billion in damages. In terms of the amount of buildings damaged or destroyed, that's over 127,000. That's what the storm looked like on many of the satellite images. Very beautiful storm, in my opinion, near its peak with that pinwheel eye that many people always comment about. And there it is on the infrared as well. And on land, this is what it also looked like. Yep, a lot of water. And this is what it looked like along the coast there, before and after. You can see how far inland the surge managed to go, and what it did to some of those buildings along the beach. And the erosion caused some problems as well, with the roads being torn up, and the flooding occurring a foot deep, maybe more in some places, and also breaking one or two barrier islands as well. Isabel, a storm that many people remember for a long time. Let's not forget that Isabel made landfall as a waning Category 2 storm, and didn't keep its strength for much longer than that after landfall. Imagine what Isabel could have done if it stayed stronger into this landfall. A storm surge, of course, bringing the waters high enough, but if it was a stronger storm as well, that could have spelt disaster for many places along the mid-Atlantic region.
Cyclone or Hurricane Catarina of March 2004 was an exceptionally rare South Atlantic hurricane. Catarina originated from a cold core stationary upper level trough established offshore southern Brazil. It began to exhibit some tropical characteristics as it moved over the South Atlantic and became organized enough to be declared a tropical storm, and eventually the hurricane, the only hurricane we've ever seen in the South Atlantic basin in recorded history. It then went on to become a Category 2 hurricane and make a landfall in Brazil in northeastern Rio Grande do Sul during the overnight hours. And it caused at least $350 million in damages and up to 10 fatalities.
Hurricane Charley was almost a surprise package when it arrived in Florida, but it had a bit of a life before then as well, passing south of Jamaica there and then heading off towards Cuba, and it was already a potent cyclone by the time it got there indeed. Here it is on the satellite imagery developing in the Caribbean Sea, close to the Cayman Islands. There goes the eye. It was always a small one, making landfall there in Cuba and then moving off into the Gulf of Mexico, and then eventually intensifying to that Category 4 peak before hitting Florida, and then moving towards the northeast and making its final landfall in the United States East Coast in the Carolinas before continuing off towards the northeast and turning post-tropical. Here's another shot of the satellite imagery and what it did. Started just east of the Lesser Antilles, and then certainly gave Jamaica a drenching. You could just about see the ice starting to appear on that on 1-2 frames there. Then it really popped out just after the Cayman Islands, and then through Cuba and then into Florida near its peak intensity of 150 miles per hour. And then the final landfall in August 2004. Well, this is what we assess of its peak. Its pressure of 943 millibars, wind speed of 150 miles an hour, 35 fatalities in all, but $16.3 billion in damages. It also damaged over 100,000 buildings across its long route. There it is after it made landfall in Florida on radar, and many other images of how it looked before and after that Florida landfall. And here's some damage shots. Charley certainly really wrecked some areas near where it made landfall, but I guess it was a pretty small storm. It could have been much larger in terms of its expanse when it did what it did. So that's something that we can take from it, but it was pretty bad near the center of where the storm made landfall on the west coast of Florida. But for many, Charley would get overshadowed by the next storm. Well, not the next storm, but a little bit later, a few weeks on, we had this, Hurricane Ivan, forming pretty far in the east of the Atlantic and intensifying pretty quickly initially, or at least quite early on in its life. It attained Category 4 intensity, one of not very many storms to do it before reaching the Lesser Antilles, but it did, weakening and then moving through the southernmost of the Lesser Antilles. Grenada really got a whack there as a Category 3 storm, and then a Category 4 down there in the southeastern Caribbean, and then into a Category 5. And then it continued towards the west-northwest, fluctuating between Category 4 and Category 5, just very close to Jamaica there as a Category 4, and then moving off Category 5 as it moved away very close to the Cayman Islands as a Category 4, then a 5 again just as it left. Couldn't make its mind up. And then it grazed the western coast of Cuba, still as a Category 5, into the Gulf of Mexico, and then making its run for the United States Gulf Coast, where it eventually made landfall as a Category 3, a major hurricane landfall, and then weakened inland over Alabama and then off towards the northeast. But that's not the end, is it? It remained a tropical depression and then into a remnant low just as it left the Delmarva Peninsula, and then moved south and then southwest, and then came back to Florida. It's like it was around a gravity field or something. And then moved through the southern part of Florida as a remnant low, and then reattained tropical storm intensity eventually as it moved closer towards the coast again. Here it is just south of Louisiana, and finally its landfall just about in Texas as a tropical depression. Ivan didn't want to quit. Well, there's many pictures of it, of course. Ivan peaking as that big Category 5 peak. Winds of 165 miles an hour by our reckoning, and a pressure of 910 millibars. 124 fatalities in all. That could have been a much worse figure, but the damage is 23.3 billion, one of the costliest storms to date. 45,000 buildings damaged and several more thousand destroyed. There's the storm near its final Category 5 peak, and there it is just before it arrived in the Gulf Coast, and many other pictures existing of Ivan, including this one coming up, a fantastic one from inside its eye. Looks like a pretty small eye there as well at the time the recon flight was in. Looks a bit wider there, they've probably taken at different times. And yeah, wonderful imagery as always from the Hurricane Hunter aircraft. Not to be outdone, the International Space Station caught some fantastic images of Ivan as well near those peaks from space. Amazing images. And here's some of the damage along the beaches. Buildings just smashed to bits. I don't know how that one was still standing, by the way. Lots of debris along the coast there, and many buildings really succumbing to the storm surge that Ivan brought with it on its final landfall, as well as those major hurricane force winds for the Gulf Coast. And of course beyond, Grenada having big issues, major hurricane, almost a landfall there, and Jamaica, the Cayman Islands and Cuba all receiving awful conditions from the height of the storm. But the public voted for a third storm from 2004 as well, Hurricane Jeanne, which formed just east of the Lesser Antilles, the Leeward Islands, and then passing just south of them as a tropical storm, and then imposing upon Puerto Rico, where it made landfall as a slow-moving tropical storm, and then briefly developed into a hurricane off the coast of the Dominican Republic. You don't see that very often, usually weaken there, not strengthen. And then it did weaken to a tropical depression briefly, then recaptured itself. Tropical storm, moved towards the north through the Turks and Caicos Islands almost, and then became a hurricane for the second time, and then did something that you don't really see very often in that part of the Atlantic, the storm taking a little bit of a loop round. It went towards the east, then it didn't know where to go, so it went south, and then eventually it went west whilst deciding whether it wanted to be a Category 1 or a Category 2 storm. It was a Category 2 on September 23rd, then weakened to a Category 1 again, and then moved towards the west out of its loop, and then towards the northernmost Bahamas, Category 2 again, and then reaching its peak as a Category 3 over those northernmost islands, and then into the eastern coast of Florida, not the first storm to do that of the year. And then moved towards the northwest, tropical storm, and then moved inland over Georgia as a tropical depression, and eventually dissipated along the east coast, turned post-tropical, just to the west in western Virginia by the looks of it. So this is what the storm looked like. That was near its first peak, I believe, and this one was whilst it was doing its loop. 125 miles an hour at peak, pressure of 950 millibars, but over 3,000 fatalities, most of them occurring on Hispaniola, where they really got a very raw deal from this storm. $7.6 billion in damages. We don't know how many buildings were damaged or destroyed, but it's believed to be many thousands. There's what the storm surge likely did, eroded the shore there, and there's a quite graphic example of just how bad the erosion was. That road was clearly closed, and this is what the storm looked like. I believe that's in Hispaniola. So the next year, and a storm that will be remembered for a very long time indeed, Hurricane Katrina of 2005, of course. Now that's what it did. I'm sure everyone is intimately familiar with what Katrina did, but these images you may never have seen before, so it's my pleasure to present them. This is what the storm, first making landfall in Florida there, and then moving out into the Gulf of Mexico, veering off to the south a little bit first, the eye certainly coming out, and then by August 28th, there it is appearing, Category 5, and then approaching Louisiana, where it made landfall as a Category 3 or 4. There it is near its peak, and how the centre of the eye mesmerisingly swivels round the external edges. There's the infrared imagery of the storm making landfall and then moving inland. This is what the centre of the storm looked like on August 28, with the recon flight going through it many times during this instance. And that was what they caught on radar. That's the recon radar that you're looking at there, with the eye just developing and continuing there as the recon flight continued to fly through. Wonderful imagery in my opinion. And then onto the visual, what they actually saw visually in the recon flight. You may remember this from the opening titles of Hurricane Week this year. Wonderful imagery from inside the huge stadium effect that the storm's eye creates. Imagine being inside that near its peak. So I think we're all familiar with what Katrina did, but if you're not, well, here are the stats. Peaking with winds of 175 miles an hour, pressure of 902 millibars, 1,833 fatalities in all, which is a humongous amount, and $108 billion in monetary damages, never seen before or since. And 110,000 buildings damaged or destroyed in total. There's the dome in New Orleans, and this is what was a common sight after Katrina along large parts of the Gulf Coast and inland. Katrina's damage was certainly felt for many tens and hundreds of miles around, and many people still haven't truly recovered today. We'll probably speak to one of our members, Nelson, about Katrina in a later episode, because he experienced it and probably has a lot to tell us about what it was like in the storm. But certainly you can see from just the images, the flooding from the damaged levee mainly, predominantly caused a big disaster that unfolded in the New Orleans area. And look at all those buildings almost completely underwater. That must be several feet, 10 feet maybe, of water in some places. And there is a shot, I think that might have been during the storm, and there's some ships just tossed about over the land. That's how far the water went, and managed to carry those ships all the way inland by several tens of feet. And it just looks like an absolute disaster for some areas where there's hardly anything left. Trees completely defoliated and buildings just scattered across in many more pieces than they originated in. It wasn't all that quiet on the other side of the world either. We had this, Typhoon Longwang, though I suspect the public just wanted me to say its name. But that's what the storm did. It was compact initially, and you can see it on the radar approaching Taiwan. It was certainly an impressive storm, peaking as a strong Category 4. Certainly had a good appearance as well near its peak intensity, and it did cause some significant problems. Its peak intensity was around 145 miles an hour, pressure 930 millibars, there it is, 149 fatalities in all, and nearly $1 billion in damages, and nearly 10,000 buildings were destroyed by the storm. Certainly one to be reckoned with, and certainly one that will be remembered in Taiwan and China. And now the next crazy storm of the Atlantic hurricane season of 2005, Hurricane Rita, the second most intense storm of that year in the Atlantic, and one of the most intense storms to ever occur in the Gulf of Mexico as well. So there it is near its peak intensity, and it did look ferocious at its peak intensity, and then it continued towards the northwest, gradually weakening eventually before it made its landfall in the Louisiana-Texas border region. Here it is appearing on radar. Imagine if you had no warning that that was coming. Well, there it is making landfall and then moving inland. Still had massive ferocity about it after it made landfall and caused some severe issues along the coastal regions there. There it is, developing south of the Keys, Key West, peaking then with winds of 180 miles an hour, a pressure of 895 millibars, the sub-900 club for the Atlantic, 125 fatalities in all, most of them indirect, and $12 billion in monetary damages in all. Over 10,000 buildings were damaged and many were destroyed, though we don't know exactly how many. There is some images of the storm on satellite near its peak intensity, and there's one a little bit later on before its landfall in the Texas-Louisiana border area. Here's some images then of what the storm did. There it is along the coast, caused some significant erosion, as you can tell, and that is what it looked like in one location that seems to have been inundated by the storm surge. There, hardly anything left of what appeared to have been a community in that location, just remnants and a flattened car there on that image, and a road that is impassable by the looks of things there. And that is on the side of the road by the looks of things, with loads of things just tossed aside, tossed away, and many places not even having the water recede, remaining underwater for some time, as you saw in that last image. Trees falling across roads. It would have been a nightmare to get anywhere after the aftermath of Hurricane Rita if you were along the coast of those areas. And certainly it was, well, for most people the right idea to evacuate, but that was the problem because many people suffered heat exhaustion and issues whilst evacuating from the storm. Yes, the public also let Stan into the top 100 too, and why not? Because it was a very bad storm for Mexico and one that might well be forgotten in future. Tropical storm over the Yucatan Peninsula, re-attaining tropical storm strength then in the Bay of Campeche as well, and became a Category 1 hurricane. Nothing special you might think, but it did cause massive problems in that area of Mexico with landslides and significant flooding and all that, with big issues as a result. So only an 80-mile-an-hour storm, 977 millibars, but nearly 2,000 fatalities. And most of these fatalities, as far as we gather, didn't even occur in Mexico. They were in Guatemala and a few in Honduras and in El Salvador as well. A bad storm for all involved. Well, it wouldn't be Hurricane Week if the most intense storm in the Atlantic wasn't in it. And it is. It's Hurricane Wilma. There it is with that mesmerizing eye. There's no other word for it. It was just an amazing feature that it had at its peak with the 2-mile wide eye that it had. And then you can still see it swirling around and the eye just filling out there. And then the second eye that it had, which is quite a large one, and certainly quite an impressive one as well, moving over the island of Cozumel off the coast of the Yucatan, and then fizzling out over the Yucatan, and then out comes its third eye, which was an even bigger one, and weakening a little bit to a Category 2 I believe it was, and then back to a Category 3 as it approached Florida with that very wide eye that it had at its Florida landfall. I think you just about saw Alpha on the right hand side there, Tropical Storm Alpha, and then it moved off towards the northeast Wilma. There it is near that landfall in Cozumel at its secondary peak, you could call it, Category 4. I'm not sure if there was a secondary peak, but it was Category 4 at that point. And finally its landfall in Florida, shown here on radar. Certainly a very impressive late season storm that Wilma turned out to be towards the end of October into the first days of November. So, we know about Wilma, but guess what? There's a bit of a surprise because we assessed the storm to have a pressure of 878 millibars and winds of 195 miles per hour. We think the NHC have been selling Wilma a little bit short. 87 fatalities in all, $29.4 billion in damages, and buildings damaged and destroyed unknown in total, but several hundred were surely affected by the storm, by its flooding that occurred, mainly in Florida, these images are, and that was certainly well documented. And as you can see, trees toppled over in many places too, and buildings damaged, windows shattered, but flooding was a big event for many locations along the southern half of Florida.
Severe Tropical Cyclone Monica was the most intense tropical cyclone in terms of wind speed to ever hit the Australian coast. It was the 17th and final storm of the 2005-2006 Australian region cyclone season. Monica reached its peak intensity at around the 23rd of April 2006 and had a 10-minute sustained wind speed of 155 miles per hour and a 1-minute sustained wind speed of 180 miles per hour and a pressure of 916 millibars, although it is disputed. The storm caused $5.1 million in damages and affected Papua New Guinea and Australia.
Well, this one, I guess, is very much up for debate. A lot of people have different opinions about how strong the storm was. Force 13's analysis shows that the storm had a pressure of 897 millibars and a wind of 185 miles an hour. Some people, including the JTWC, think that it may well have been even stronger than that. But that's what we say about the storm, and who will really know how strong Monica was? That's what it did, though. Now to Ioki, which really tried to be like John but didn't get the memo that it had to start in the East Pacific if it wanted to be like John. So nonetheless it started in the central and became a significant hurricane. And I can't remember if this is still a fact, surely someone will correct me on it, but Is it still the storm that has the highest ACE on record, the highest accumulated cyclone energy? It's certainly up there, because it kept its intensity for such a long time in the central and western Pacific. There it is, deciding whether it wants to be a Category 4 or Category 5, which it was making that decision for quite a long time. But there it is, moving towards the west-southwest there, and then westerly, and then to the northwest, and then started to approach that small island you can see there. That's Wake Island, where the pressure went down to 934 millibars, very close to the centre of the storm. Look at that, the eye just grazed the northern part of the island. Continued off to the northwest, and then started to look like it was waning down to Category 3 status there, passing just north of Minami Torishima, and then off towards the northwest and gradually weakening as it tried to reach Japan, but ultimately failed. But Aoki did cause problems on Wake Island, and that amounted to $88 million in damages. The storm peaked with winds of 157 miles an hour, according to our analysis, very precise, and a pressure of 919 millibars. Well, be thankful there's no islands in that part of the Pacific, because if there were, there would have been a lot more problems from this storm. And now an Arabian Sea storm, and it did form just inside the Arabian Sea next to the west coast of India and became Cyclone Gonu, which peaked as a Category 5 storm, albeit somewhat briefly, and then approached the coast of Oman, just about skirting the coast there, and finally arriving in Iran as a tropical depression. There it is again, peaking as a Category 5 there briefly, and then grazing the coast. There it is at peak, and it peaked as a Category 5, as I said already, with 160 mile an hour winds, a pressure of 900 millibars. 115 fatalities in all, and $4.4 billion in damages to this area that doesn't really expect tropical cyclones very often at all, with over 234 buildings damaged or destroyed, and a few cars as well. Hurricane Dean of 2007 is next up, and I'm sure many people are familiar with it in the Atlantic. Well, let's remind ourselves just what it did. Started out as a very small cyclone, I guess, but gradually gained its size as it moved through the Lesser Antilles, was already a Category 2, and then really strengthened there, became a Category 4, and then, who knows, there might be cause to call it a Category 5 at that point, for all we know. It did look pretty good, passing just south of Jamaica, and then actually attaining Category 5 status on its approach to the Yucatan Peninsula, which it smashed into at its peak. It then moved into the Bay of Campeche and finally made landfall in the Veracruz region of Mexico. Let's take a look at that satellite imagery again from early on there in the eastern Caribbean. It did look pretty good, affecting Hispaniola there, and then moving on, its influence starting to increase over Jamaica, then onto Cuba, just about the southern part of Cuba receiving some of the spiral bands from the storm, thunderstorms flaring up. Jamaica had a pretty bad event with the southern part of the country. There it is, not far from Jamaica in that image. Peaking from Force 13's analysis with winds of 165 miles an hour and a pressure of 905 millibars. 45 fatalities in all, could have been much worse, and $1.6 billion in monetary damages. Buildings damaged and destroyed totaled nearly 4,000 from this storm. Sounds like it could have been a much worse phenomenon, but Dean did what it did nonetheless, and that certainly will not be forgotten anytime soon. And here's some images from the International Space Station showing its vast expanse. Yeah, that's Hurricane Dean. Well, I don't think anyone is surprised that the next storm to appear after Dean would be Felix, the second Category 5 storm of the 2007 Atlantic hurricane season, passing just about over Grenada as a tropical storm, much more southerly in latitude than Dean, its brother, became a Category 5 storm earlier than Dean did, and became a Category 5 twice, reaching Category 5 intensity just as it was making landfall in northern Nicaragua, and then moved over Honduras, weakened into a tropical depression and then a low pressure system into just about the southern part of the Yucatan Peninsula over Belize, and then dissipated completely just before it managed to reach the Bay of Campeche. So what did it do then in all? 133 fatalities, $720 million in damages, so not quite as bad as Dean, but did cause a lot of damaged buildings with over 10,000. 160 miles an hour by Force 13's analysis, and the pressure remains the same, 929 millibars. Slightly weaker, but certainly caused a problem. That's inside the eye at night, with the moon shining in there. And this is what it looked like in the places that Felix affected. But before the year was out, the North Indian wanted to have a say, and that it did, in Cyclone Sidr of 2007, peaking as a Category 5 before launching itself into Bangladesh as a Category 4, causing untold problems. At least 3,447 fatalities, could be much higher, 160 miles an hour at peak with a pressure of 944 millibars. $1.7 billion in monetary damages, and you can certainly see why with some of these images that are all too common in this part of the world whenever some big storm comes around. And they do happen every so often, and well, it wouldn't be surprising if it happened again anytime soon. But this is what it looked like back in 2007.
Hurricane Ike of 2008 was the worst hurricane to affect the island nation of Cuba in terms of damage costs. Ike was a typical Cape Verde type system moving towards the northwest, rapidly intensifying into a Category 4 hurricane along the way, becoming the strongest hurricane of the 2008 Atlantic hurricane season. Then a ridge towards the west of Ike began to move it towards the west, and then eventually, unusually, towards the southwest, towards the Turks and Caicos Islands, and eventually the eastern tip of Cuba as a Category 4 hurricane. Ike then traversed the entire island of Cuba, emerging into the Gulf as a Category 1 hurricane instead of a Category 4. The storm then crossed the entire Gulf of Mexico and then made an eventual landfall in Galveston, Texas as a strong Category 2 approaching Category 3 hurricane. It then moved over the United States and became extratropical over the Midwest. Ike is best known for its impacts in Galveston primarily to test the ability of the seawall to see how it could, protect the city of Galveston. It ended up doing its job in some ways, in other ways not so much. This storm is the costliest hurricane to affect the island of Cuba, as I said, about $7 billion of damage there. They already had suffered a lot from Gustav just a few weeks ago, or maybe even a few days ago, actually. And also at least $30 billion in damage in the Galveston area. So Ike was, in all, Ike is the third costliest hurricane in the Atlantic to date.
And in terms of Cuba, it was the most costliest storm ever to hit the country, and remains so even today. Not many pictures from Cuba, unfortunately, but most of them from the United States, and you can still see what Ike did in the Texas area. A lot of images that you may well be familiar with, the flooding, the storm surge, and that area of Texas that really bore the brunt of the storm, where just absolutely obliterated areas of land and lots of buildings destroyed, and you can see here how some communities were affected by Hurricane Ike. And now to the laughably small Tropical Storm Marco. That's the only reason I can think that the public voted for it. A very short-lived tropical storm that didn't really affect anywhere as a tropical storm because it was so small and it didn't even make landfall at that intensity. No fatalities, up to $500,000 in damages, but that's just a guess. 250 buildings damaged in the end from that tiny spidge in the southern Gulf of Mexico. 65 miles an hour and a pressure of 998. Not the weakest in Hurricane Week, believe it or not. You're watching Force 13's live streaming service, a Hurricane Week special. Hello, welcome. This is Force 13 Live, a Hurricane Week special on day 4. Well, there's another chapter that's out of the way and one more to come tomorrow. You can vote at any time, of course, on the website force13.com/HW/2016, or you can just navigate there through the website. Should be pretty easy enough to find regardless. My name's Nathan Foy. I'm joined as always by the Skype team who are somewhere in the background. Hello.
Hello.
Anyone there?
Hello, people.
Hello.
The voice of Daniel and many others over there in the background. Wonderful.
How are you?
Fine. And there they all are. Wonderful. Plenty of people to talk to tonight. Jason, Cesar, Isaac, Marcel, David, Hank, Craig, and Daniel. And there's a lot of interesting storms that have been on the show tonight. A lot of that have been well remembered, a lot of them that are very, very notable, and a lot of them that really resonate to everyone's consciousness, I suppose. Things like Katrina, Wilma, Rita, and all those others from 2004, 2008. Does anyone have a bone to pick with the public on any of the storms that they should have chosen, or maybe they shouldn't have chosen for those in that part? Marco, perhaps?
Marco, well, that is something that I want to start first, because Marco, well, of course, is kinda remarkable of its size, but
That's it.
well, it didn't cost really so much damage. Well, almost nothing, I must say.
Yeah.
And no fatalities, and just compare and the image that we saw recently of Marco and comparing and the other storm in the Pacific basin. I don't remember the name of the storm. Just compare the size of those storms, the size of a typical cyclone, and then the size of Marco. That, well, it is like, what the hell is that storm? Or where did it came from? Because
Yeah.
it was incredible.
No.
But
there's another storm that I want to bring a mention to that should not be on this list. Longwang. We have a lot of immature people who watch this show, clearly. So, yeah. I mean, it was a bad storm.
It was a bad storm for some people.
It was a bad storm, but still, it's more likely due to people's immaturity than anything.
Yes.
Regardless, we still had our fair share of memorable,
just agrees in the background.
memorable and remarkable storms on today's list. Other than those two storms, I can't really complain. Some people say Monica should be here. I think Monica should be here because it was probably the strongest ever seen in the Southern Hemisphere. I know Zoe officially is the strongest, but Monica was probably
in the Australian region.
Strongest in Australia. Only Cat 5 ever make landfall in Australia on the Saffir-Simpson scale.
Yeah, indeed, that's right. Oh, Yasi was close.
Oh.
Okay,
Yasi was
so
close. That could have been a worst case scenario, by the way, if it was a bit worse than what it was. Marcel?
Okay, so I will talk about Hurricane Stan, and I think it was a very deadly storm for Guatemala.
Yes.
There were registered landslides in the town of Sola in Lake Atlan, and
I'm not intimately familiar with the geography of Guatemala, unfortunately.
And the town disappeared.
A town disappeared, indeed. Yes, I did read about that. That was responsible for most of the fatalities, indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah, 1,600 in total from Stan, and rightfully got retired. There's going to be a lot more exciting storms in tomorrow's part as well. Some people want to... Awesome Dude Man says, vote for Joaquin. Why would you do that necessarily?
No, Joaquin.
No one likes Joaquin in here.
You see, Stan is a pretty good example of, category really doesn't matter because, it could still be a really destructive storm, even though it's a category 1. Same thing with Sandy.
Tropical Storm Allison.
Yeah. Sandy and Stan really proved that category really doesn't matter with storms.
Yeah. Do you think that this category scale for hurricanes is very much devalued when it affects particularly vulnerable places like these low-lying areas?
Extensively. We will go into details later, but not right now. To adjust for tropical cyclone intensity. But, it's controversial, in my opinion, whether we should still be using the Saffir-Simpson scale or not.
That's something we'll have a debate about one day, I'm sure, after Hurricane Week. So let's check in with what the current scores are right now, shall we? Here is the latest, if it appears. There we are. That's the top storms right now on the public vote. The experts panel are still yet to vote. That will occur on Saturday. They'll have lots of votes to distribute towards which storms. We've got geographical distribution, so hopefully we won't get any bias from people all around the world voting on what their top 10 storms are, and you'll get to see a lot more of that on Saturday. But right now, Patricia with 30 votes, Hyann 28, Katrina 14, Sandy 12, and the Great Hurricane with 9 votes in 5th. And then you've got the Odisha cyclone tied with Winston in 6th and 7th. Mitch in 8th with 5, Joaquin and Sudalore with 4. Joaquin, if it didn't sink a ship, wouldn't the fatality count have been very nearly nil?
Yeah.
Or actually nil?
No, there was one death called Joaquin that didn't have to do with the Alpha sinking. I think it was.
Joaquin was I would say a wake-up call more than anything.
Yeah, because threatening the U.S. East Coast is kind of a wake-up call for all that, and
when it was once projected to hit North Carolina as a Category 3.
Yeah, and it was just kind of a wake-up call, and I guess it was just kind of like just a preparedness for maybe something that came along later in the year following. I will not mention the storm's name because
I didn't impose that rule in the chat, by the way. Wasn't me.
That was me.
Wasn't me. I don't mind talking about Matthew. Just that you'll have to be very creative about how you're going to talk about Matthew in the comment section, it would appear.
Oh my
somehow avoid its
goodness.
name.
Yes.
Look, it's like every storm of its day, it's going to get overhyped. And Matthew probably does get a little bit overhyped. But let's stick to the facts then. Matthew was the deadliest storm since when? 2008? Or earlier?
2005.
2005.
Can't stand.
Deadliest storm in over a decade. So, you know, it's been pretty bad. I don't. How does it rank in? But when you think of the grand scheme of things, how does it rank in terms of all Atlantic storms for most deadliest storms? It's probably not very high, even though it did a terrible death toll of over 1,000.
Yeah, it's not very high when it comes to overall death toll, compared to some other storms. But still, it's it's still pretty bad.
Okay. More questions then. What's the deadliest hurricane to hit Cuba? Good question.
The 1932 hurricane.
1932 hurricane? What did that do? That's not on here. That's not on. Public didn't vote for it.
Annoyingly. I think it was like 3,100 deaths, I'm pretty sure.
Wow. That's a lot.
How can that not be in Hurricane Week?
I don't know.
What's that?
How can that not be in Hurricane Week?
Yeah, well, people wanted to vote for Marco instead.
And Ava.
And they forgot about Betsy too, didn't they? They forgot about. Okay, here's actually an interesting question. What is the most what's the most underrated Category 5 storm? That is a very good question.
Nice try, Dimitri. I see what you did there. But
oh, for goodness sake.
Let's see. I would say probably. That's a hard one.
It is a hard one, isn't it? When you try and think of it. Devin
I'm
thinks
gonna
it's Mike.
Well, he has certain opinions on Mike that I really kind of don't really agree with that much, but okay. Donna, well, I think Donna wasn't really underrated.
In my opinion, it would have to be one of the hurricanes that Force 13's analysis has upgraded to a Category 5, and there have been a handful of those. Might talk about them on a later date. There were 3 Pacific hurricanes in the 80s, I believe, that were upgraded to a Category 5. Raymond, was it? No, might have been Raymond. Ramon, and...
Kevin?
Kevin was one, yes, in the early 90s as well, that we upgraded to a Category 5. And do take a look at these storms before you think, oh, that's nonsense, because the officials know. But do they actually know? We've only got 40 years of satellite archives to rely upon, and they hardly knew what they were doing back then. They hardly know what they're doing now. They keep having to do post-cyclone reports to upgrade or downgrade the storms. They still can't get it right.
Or they still can't get a storm right. I
Yeah.
won't mention its name.
So, I mean, I guess what I say from a scientific standpoint here, and what any good scientist does, is question everything.
Yeah.
Everything that you
Fair
see.
point.
Yeah. It really, with these storms, some of them we might never know how intense they actually were, because A, they didn't have satellite, or B, they never had a plane in them.
Absolutely.
So, for storms like back in the early 60s that we had no satellite data from, that said they were 200 miles an hour in the East Pacific, in the Western Pacific.
But hey,
such as
it wouldn't be fun if we knew all the answers. That's what makes it exciting, how we all have different opinions on the storms that we don't know about.
Yeah, storms such as Nancy, Violet, Ruth, Ida, I think was probably 200 miles an hour.
Useless person wants to know, what if Ike dissipated over Cuba before reaching Texas? Would it still be retired? Interesting question.
Likely.
Yes.
Yeah, I
Yes,
reckon
because-
it would have been. Wasn't it the worst, the costliest storm for Cuba anyway?
Yep.
Yeah.
It would. Even without a U.S. landfall, it would have still been retired.
Yeah, I reckon so.
Regardless.
If you've got any more questions for us whilst we're on the air, we're very pleased to answer them. We're here for just over half an hour, and we'll be keeping you updated for a while with the latest voting counts and anything else. Maybe some Guess the Storm if anyone wants to do it. Latest scores: Patricia up to 31, Hyan 28, Katrina 14, and Sandy at catching it with 13. So interesting how the voting is panning out right now, and you might want to let all your friends know as well, so we can get some more votes on the board.
Yeah, CHD Returns actually has a decent question. What is your opinion on Mediterranean hurricanes, aka Medicanes, and with the warming waters, could one possibly do some real damage in the future? We did see one about a month ago near Greece. Didn't really do much damage, but it was certainly interesting to actually see a Medicane, through its life cycle.
Go on to that thing again about challenging everything. Who said that for certain that sea surface temperature threshold is 26.5 degrees? Alex proved that soundly wrong. So anything can happen, even in the Mediterranean, I would say.
Well, Alex, that was a different scenario. It wasn't just because of the sea.
Yeah, it's not just because it's just going to happen, but if Alex can happen, it could possibly happen in the Mediterranean.
The thing is with Alex is that the baroclinicity allowed the storm to really just, blow up at you in ways that we
Though I've never seen in what we would call a 100% tropical cyclone in the Mediterranean. They always look hybrid, don't they?
Alex looked maybe had some slight characteristics of a subtropical storm at peak.
Alex was probably 80% tropical.
Yeah. Not completely tropical.
And it was a hurricane.
It was a hurricane.
Yeah. It was enough to be declared a tropical.
So tropical hurricane.
Daniel?
That's probably possible.
I was going to ask, was Alex a moron?
It was for the Azores, I'm sure.
Oh yeah.
Jesus, not Alex.
Okay.
That was an interesting question that you just removed.
It had to do with Matthew. I'm sorry, but
It was an interesting question. Whether Matthew would have still gone to Florida if it hadn't have veered west near the Bahamas, right? Is it something like that?
If it veered west near the Bahamas, then it would have made landfall in Florida.
Well, it did. It sort of did a jog to the west, just round the northernmost island, the name of which I forget.
Yeah, Grand Bahama, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
If it was further onshore, or if it was a bit farther to the west, for Florida, it would have been much worse. It wasn't as bad a storm as it was, but it would have been a lot worse than it was. Dimitri also asked a question related to Matthew that I won't delete. What is Matthew's new name? It's very likely to be retired. Likely Matthias. I would think something a bit. Matthias is probably logical, and to be honest, it's kind of lazy, but whatever. Malcolm, I think, is a decent choice. Mark is kind of lame. Mason's kind of lame.
They're going to make it Matt, aren't they? They're going to call it Matt. Or Matthew with one T.
Oh, gosh.
That'd be a new low, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
I don't have that little faith in the WMO changing the name.
Yeah, if Rena wasn't bad already.
Rena.
They can't name it Max because it's in the EPAC.
True.
Thing with Marty.
Yep.
Yeah,
indeed.
Martin may not be a bad choice. Whatever.
So, from all the storms that we saw during Hurricane Week today in Part 4, what would you guys think it was the worst out of all those, I guess?
The worst hurricane of the Part 4? That's very, very difficult question, actually,
Katrina?
because...
Probably.
Well, I'm not sure. In damages, of course, Katrina, but I'm thinking about Jeanne in terms of of victims or people that died.
Jeanne deadliest, yes.
Yes, Jeanne the deadliest of this episode. Katrina, obviously, of the cause list. I don't know. It is a very hard question because there were many storms that still be remembered for a long time. But I don't know. What do you think, guys?
I say the same. That's a very difficult question.
Yeah. Logan wants to know, what was the worst cyclone ever?
Well, you can interpret that in many different ways.
Absolutely.
Answer this question.
It says the worst cyclone, not a typhoon or hurricane. So it means
the cyclone of 1970.
It is Cyclone Bola Cyclone.
You know,
If it was the worst tropical cyclone, then it'd probably still be the Bola cyclone.
it just depends on your interpretation. If a cyclone hits one person, then that one person will say it's that cyclone. Yeah, this is how it is. Anyway, one person wants to know if we'll do more live streams in the future. Well, yes, we've been doing live streams for nearly 2 years, believe it or not. By the way, we've just crossed over into the 2nd of December. Nothing special happening on this day. This time yesterday we were celebrating, in inverted commas, the end of the Atlantic Hurricane season 2016, and now it's just 1 day less until 2017 season begins. I don't know if anyone's got any more thoughts on what to expect next year. Maybe Craig might want to offer something since we've actually able to hear him tonight.
I am not even going to bother dipping into 2017.
Okay. Well, I
Yeah,
offered
it's
it.
People have already been warning it over. That's the worst of it.
And if anyone wanted to know about Tropical Storm Nada, it did pretty much that. Right now it has virtually dissipated, has it not?
Nada, nothing.
There is something that is concerning me, actually. If you've been looking at the models for the North Indian Ocean, not just GFS, but many models have been saying a pretty powerful cyclonic storm will form. GFS currently saying 924. Jeez. And that's a landfall pretty close.
Yeah, well, we lost them there for a moment.
Yeah, Cat 5 with that pressure.
Oh, GFS. Oh, wow.
Yeah, you
No,
might
that's
want to
the first time
repeat that because we lost the stream just then.
Oh, okay. Unfortunately, I can't get the details because for some it's not designated yet, so I can't get the exact wind speed. But that looks like at least that pressure would suggest strong Cat 4 / weak Cat 5. But interestingly enough, the 10 millibar winds are only saying 110 knots, which is not even a Cat 4. Which is strong.
But you know, you can have
you don't really go off of wind
discrepancies
speed,
on
you go off the air
models.
pressure.
You don't go. Yeah, you really don't go off that.
No, you don't go off either. I was going to say something remarkably different next time in 6 hours.
Well, actually, no. The GFS has been pretty consistent about it. Euro, I think, is saying a similar thing.
Yeah, but how far out is this?
About next week.
GFS says a lot of things like that they have this year.
Yeah.
The thing is, the invest is formed is 99W, so that's the one that's supposed to be coming.
99W is where is 99W right now?
That's located near, I think it's located near Malaysia or maybe Indonesia.
And it's possible that it will enter into the North Indian Ocean.
In fact, no, it's not possible. It will.
Oh, ouch.
Okay, let's see. I think Awesome Dude Man was doing a 2017 prediction and saying 20 storms, yeah.
No.
19 or 10 hurricanes, depending on what they think. Anyway, Brazilian Mapping says, what if Allison had an Ivan type after landfall in Texas? I don't really understand that. Was it, you mean round 2 as a tropical storm?
I think Brazilian means the track that Ivan took when it re-entered to the ocean and went south and re-entered again the Gulf of Mexico and made another landfall.
It would have been more flooding misery, wouldn't it? Quite clearly.
Yes. That's pretty possible. So I think it will be the same effects. That's right.
Yeah.
That's left.
Okay. I just want to mention that I just checked and all 4 major models are agreeing with this North Indian cyclone.
That's interesting. We'll obviously look out for that. If we do have a reason to go live, if there's any cyclones active, we will do that in the future. If not, we will do merely storm updates, which we always end up doing for storms threatening land. What's so funny over there?
Jesus. Nothing. Sorry about that, Nathan.
Oh, good. Daniel, what was your pick of the storms out in this part of the week, today?
Do you mean what I voted for?
Well, you could say what you voted for if you like.
Well,
but,
unfortunately, I didn't vote.
and any storms that you have any thoughts about?
Well, I could just say that I think Sandy's overhyped, as everyone else would agree with. Yeah.
Well,
He's actually got a point.
It was ludicrous at the time when Sandy was doing what it was doing. Everyone kept giving it silly names like Superstorm Sandy and Frankenstorm. Just call it Sandy, for goodness sake. Might sound a bit old-fashioned, but there you go. And Sandy, of course, will be on tomorrow's Hurricane Week Day 5, as well as every other storm from between 2008 and 2016. Any storms that you're looking forward to seeing?
Who? Me?
Anyone tomorrow.
Igor, I want to see what intensity you have it as. I have it as a Cat 5. I know that.
What about
Igor is on here, and
you did not just say Santa Hodson.
And also, maybe you guys might have an opinion on the reanalysis that we did for Hurricane Wilma, how we found it to be stronger than what they said. I mean, after seeing Patricia last year, Wilma was very similar, and so not just for that reason, but using our usual rules and how Recon didn't get the exact center when they measured 882 millibars, we put it down at 878 and a wind speed of 195 miles an hour. Thoughts?
Furthermore, they actually didn't go through. They actually left when the pressure was still dropping. At the 882 millibar peak, it could have been.
And big storms like that, we know, can fluctuate very, very quickly. So who knows how far it could have gone down before it went back up again.
Probably down to at least what you said, 878 millibars. I have the same thing down for my analysis. It's definitely something. It's definitely really an interesting topic. Easily the not easily, but the strongest storm I've ever seen in the Atlantic Basin.
Quite easily. I mean, we put Gilbert down slightly as well at 886 millibars, but it's still got nothing on Wilma.
Well, I wouldn't say nothing on Wilma. Gilbert was still extremely impressive on satellite imagery. But then again, Wilma was.
There are two different types of storm, really. Gilbert never had that pinhole eye. It was and never intensified so quickly. You get those different types of storms, don't you, where they just rapidly intensify, or you have storms that are a lot more stable and a lot more predictable, like Gilbert in a way.
Oh. Well, they were both storms that were headed towards the Yucatan and the Western Caribbean, which was notorious for being basically a hot tub, where storms can just blow up really quickly into these monsters of storms. Gilbert Wilma, a good example. Dean is a good example of that. I think, what was that storm? Janet is a good example of that.
Janet, yeah. That could have been a very strong storm, more than we think.
That could have been.
I remember reading about it. I can't remember the specifics, but I'm sure there was something about it on how it could have been much stronger than what they said, which was 914 and 175 miles an hour, something like that.
That's for the damage that it did. That didn't really look like a storm of the intensity that they had it down. That looked like a storm that could have been possibly as high as 190 miles an hour, maybe even slightly more than that. That might sound a little bit crazy, I know, but it's definitely.
But I do think we were talking about these things yesterday on how people might need to open their minds a little bit, because we don't fully understand where the extremes lie with these storms, because we haven't, in my opinion, been observing them nearly as long as we need to find out what those extremes are. For instance, the North Indian Ocean cyclone of 1823 with a pressure of 897 millibars happened. A storm in 1927 in the Western Pacific that had a pressure of 887 millibars and could have been lower.
I'm pretty sure that was a similar storm to Moranti, correct?
Yeah, sort of. Only the ending was different.
Oh.
It hooked away from Taiwan ultimately, but on approach to Taiwan, it reached that massive peak. There's a lot of storms that people don't really know about that did a lot of things, and you know, in his start, the Great Hurricane could have been of any intensity. Cat 5, quite clearly a Cat 5 over Barbados, and when was the other time that ever happened? Hardly anything. Hugo was probably the closest thing to that.
That was a little bit too far north, actually.
So, you know, we don't... I just feel that people need to be a little bit open-minded to what is possible with nature, I guess. Anyway, enough of that. I mean, do you guys want to do Guess the Storm or something in these last 20 minutes? I think the viewers want a little bit of a vengeance after yesterday. Revenge.
Yeah. We have about 20 minutes left, okay.
Christ, let the rage begin.
Craig, you got anything? Because I can't screen share right now.
Well, Strat had one last night, but he's not here.
Yeah,
You sure it wasn't going to be another Igor, because that one that you did share was actually Igor.
That was Igor. I looked into it, and that was not Gashton, that was Igor.
Gashton was annular, depending on which peak he was looking at.
Dimitri Garcia says, what was the hurricane to hit Trinidad and Tobago in 1933? Well, that'd be the Trinidad and Tobago hurricane of 1933. which is, I believe, oh my goodness, the southern, was it the southernmost hurricane landfall in the Atlantic?
Yeah.
Yeah, Otto
sure.
is second, isn't it, Otto?
Otto.
Did we find out whether Otto was second or third or something like that?
I think Otto was second. Actually.
Which, by the way, if I think the NHC were fooling you when they said it was only a Category 2. I'm pretty confident that Otto was a Category 3 at landfall. Take a look at the satellite imagery if you're unconvinced, because it looks.
If you say it's a Cat 2, then
for
Jesus.
its latitude, it looked probably more than minimal Cat 3, but Force 13's official analysis keeps it at 115. Anyway, yeah, I don't know if anyone wants to share anything right now.
Isaac has something on webcam.
Is he?
Is he trying to show anything?
It's a computer keyboard.
Well, you know, like on the screen.
Yeah. Oh, there is a screen. That is a storm.
I don't know what the hell it's supposed to be, obviously.
Well, I can't tell because I can't see the screen.
It's very distant. I wouldn't have a clue looking at that.
And actually, speaking of Otto, its remnants are actually still going in the EPAC.
Otto's remnants are still going.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
But it's holding on to a very thin needle.
Yeah,
okay, Isaac has that image.
Define thin.
That is. It would help. It would help if there were land outlines, or at least discernible ones. See if we can get a close up of that image. Oh, there are. Those do appear to be land outlines.
Yeah, those look. Yeah, those are probably islands somewhere in the West back.
Oh, that appears. That is the Marshall Islands.
Probably. Oh, what's one affecting the Marshall Islands?
Most like just the Micronesian islands.
No,
it's near
Majuro.
Alright.
Oh dear.
Yeah, I mean, it can't be Packer.
No.
If it is, I'd be very annoyed. I don't know right now.
It's not Nita.
You better make sure Marcel's not looking it up.
No, I'm not looking up things.
You are Marcel.
Here we go. Let the games begin.
Hold on. We're looking it up.
No. Typhoon gay.
No, you.
I somehow don't see that being it.
No.
I guess for Haiyan. No. I'm not sure whether it might be one of the storms of 2015 because a lot of them formed far east, but I don't think any of them formed that far east.
Nah, none of them have an eye wall that far east.
Only one I could think of that would form that far east would be Maysac.
Maysac wasn't much of that.
Yeah.
Typhoon Gay.
How do we know whether we've got it right?
Yeah.
That's true. He didn't think about that.
Yeah, that didn't go very well.
This is Typhoon Gay.
You think so?
You've said that.
So in other words, he's looked it up.
I am not looking. I haven't looked it up. You dumb.
Well, if it is, Martinez has it. Aoki is another guess that's come in, but it wasn't in that area. It was further north. A guess for Nanka.
Interesting guess, but I don't think so.
Do we have any confirmation?
Yeah.
No.
Can you post like in the chat if we have it correct?
Yeah, that would help. Not very streamlined this evening, are we?
No. We are not. Oh god, it was gay.
It was?
It was.
Yep.
Well, there we are.
Paul's looked it up.
Okay.
We got the answer.
I
Well done,
looked it
Martinez.
up. No more, please.
Marcel, look it up.
So has Gay finally come out of the closet?
Yeah, it's come out of the Western Pacific closet. Now,
I should have thought.
the latest voting: Patricia 31 votes, Hyann 28, Katrina 14, Sandy 13, Great Hurricane 9. I'm rooting for the Great Hurricane. Go on, Great Hurricane. Voting closes on Saturday night, by the way. We're doing our final part on Saturday. I'm not sure exactly what time we're beginning. I think we're going to be beginning, don't quote me on this, but at the moment it looks like it's going to be 10 p.m. UTC, which is an hour before the times that we've been running at this week, for perspective. So that's that. Let's see if we can speak to people that we've not heard from properly yet. Cesar, are you around? TikTok? Maybe not. David, how about you?
Oh, Isaac.
Oh, maybe.
Okay, the people that aren't in the room. I'm not sure if Jason would like to speak either this evening. That's up to you.
I'm here.
Oh, there he is. Jason's here. Have you got anything to say about voting patterns or anything? Because you're on the pulse with that right now.
There was a group of votes for the Odisha cyclone just last night.
What have the most recent votes been?
The latest vote is for Sandy. There's another for Patricia.
Nudges Sandy up to 13.
Yeah, they're all
mixed
votes around.
Yeah, any weird ones that have gotten votes maybe? I don't know. Today. I see that Chris Darmier has a vote.
Yeah.
That's a computer
There's
screen.
one for Sidr.
Yep, I'm pulling one up. Oh, is my screen share gone?
Yeah, it just disappeared there. Poor Tip only has 3 votes, as does Monica. Oh, now we're looking at a model run. Okay, is this another Guess the Storm then? Here we go. What is that? Now, that appears to be Haiti, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, God, I bet.
Oh, is it Cuba? No, it's Cuba.
Okay.
No, definitely Cuba.
Marcel,
like
do not go on Wikipedia and look
looks
it up,
like
please.
a cloudy mess.
I am not licking the dove. No more.
Wow.
Martinez, do we get an I voted sticker? Only an electronic one, I'm afraid.
There you go.
I can tell you that the storm is clearly clearly a tropical storm, or actually maybe not so clearly.
Yeah, it looks more like an invest. Hi.
Danny?
Oh, damn it.
Looks worse than
Danny?
Colin.
Is that Paula?
No, it's not Danny.
Okay, guess it's coming thick and fast. Erica, Jose, Cindy, Matthew, Joan.
No, it's not that.
Thomas.
Wait, what? What's
Thomas. The last one.
No.
And Dimitri also sent a message saying, "Will Mitch return?" Not sure quite what you mean by that.
No.
But Mitch was on Hurricane Week. I think it was in yesterday's video, or was it the one before? The one before. Nope, yesterday's.
I'll give you a hint. This storm it has occurred in the last 20 years.
Yeah, quite clearly. Another guess is Emily Otto.
No.
Nelson says. Jeanson or Johnson says Jeanne. G-E-N-N-E. Earl. Fiona.
No.
How about in the room? I'm getting worried that no one's guessing.
I don't know what that is, unfortunately.
This is the experts panel. We've got to win.
Is this I know some people might get mad at me, but is this tropical storm or Hurricane Katrina?
No.
Awesome Dude Man has an interesting one. Hermine is an invest. I don't think it looked that good.
No. No. I mean, it was in this area, but it didn't look good.
Julio says, asked me, what if Mitch hit Belize instead of Honduras? Well, that's what the 1998 what might have been sort of did, didn't it? And it would have been disaster for Belize, probably worse than Janet.
Yeah.
Considering how it was slow moving. Anyway. Other guesses coming in. Cristobal, Colin, Edouard, Hannah, Alpha, and Jeanne.
No. Okay,
this is Tropical Storm Nicole.
Yes, it is. Of what
First
year?
guess after all that.
Of what year?
Screw the year, we got it.
And I have my guess for you guys.
No, games. What year did this occur?
Sorry?
What year? Nicole? Which year? Yep.
Whatever he said.
Okay.
He glitched out.
Well, I have my storm already if you want to see.
Go right ahead.
Nice.
Okie dokie. Okay, let's go now.
Okay.
This is it. Guess the storm.
Thomas.
I can't see the storm, so I'll have to wait. I'll have to wait a little bit. 1 second.
Wait a minute. You're using a Mac? Give me a bucket, please.
Sorry, it's the only computer I have.
Could you zoom in on it at all?
I'm just waiting for it to come up on the stream.
Oh well, the viewers need an advantage.
I have no idea.
Oh. Is this Lily?
No, it is not Lily.
I wonder if it might be Ida.
It is not Ida.
I was going to say
Is that Kate?
No, it is not Kate.
Arlene.
It's not Arlene.
Is it
Arlene.
Could this Gustav? No.
It is not Gustav.
No.
Lots of guesses coming in. Martinez already did say Gustav. Isaac, Kyle, Ike, Katrina. Katrina.
No.
Oh my goodness.
Where were the
1999 Katrina. I see.
It is not Katrina, it is not Ike.
Let's see. What was that one storm from that one year?
Which one?
Sorry for the background noise.
Okay.
Awesome Dude Man says Alex from 2008.
There was no Alex in 2008.
He's 10.
Come on.
Okay.
Stupid guess from me, probably Bill.
Bill?
Darn it.
Bill?
It wasn't that. No.
Well, I'm going to give you a hint. That storm occurred in the 2010, between 2010 and 2013.
But you sort of skipped there, so it happened in 2010, didn't it?
Rina.
Between 2010 and 2013.
Rina.
Is it Rina?
No, it is not Rina.
Paula?
Yes.
I was going to say Paula. Yeah.
It is Hurricane Paula weakening as a minimal hurricane in that image, if I'm not wrong.
Well, damn, I wanted to help the viewers, but no one said Paula. I can't give them any points. 2-0 to the team again. We've only got time for one more as well, I'm afraid.
Oh, I have one, unless someone else wants to go.
I don't know. Does anyone want to go?
Before I go.
Before we go?
Just make sure the webcams just stay stable and not too shaky.
Oh, okay. Hold on. I gotta look at what I'm doing for a second. Hold on. Okay. See if we could guess this. See if we could guess the storm.
Oh, here we go.
God.
Well, that looks awfully familiar.
Doesn't it just?
Not what do you think it is?
Can't see the storm again.
Neither.
No.
Just
no.
Pan it up just 1 sec.
Quality's too good to be anything from before 2006.
I'm still waiting for it to come up on the stream because for some reason the screen doesn't work. Oh, there it is. Oh. No, is it? That's not Hagapit, is it? No.
No.
The core's too big.
How far?
No. I can give you hints if you need any.
Okay. It's from Ram.
This storm is in the West Pacific.
Yeah, I
come
figured
on.
that.
Come on.
And obviously it's a Category 5.
Yeah, it looks like a Ram image, so it's from 2006 or earlier.
Later.
Later, sorry, my bad.
Plenty of guesses coming in already. Bopa, Salmai, Haiyan. I'm not sure if that Lenny one was related to this storm, but hang your head in shame if it was.
God.
Nothing like Lenny.
Probably was related to Paula in the Atlantic.
The storm happened.
I'm thinking it might be one of the 2014 storms.
No. You guys are way off. The storm happened in the season between 1995 to 1999.
Angry face. They managed to get good quality then, didn't they?
Yep.
Jeez.
Well, maybe it's one of the 1997 storms. There's so many to choose from.
Oh gosh.
Again, it's a Category 5.
Yeah.
So yeah.
They're not short of Cat 5s that year, are they?
Let's see.
Not sure what Packer looked like. Certainly doesn't.
No,
look
it's
like
not Packer.
It's not open bracket Akka.
No, maybe it's Joan.
No.
Winnie, Ivan.
Nope.
No.
Oliwa. Oliwa.
No.
Zeb.
Tropical
yes,
storm.
you got it right. You got it right, Nathan.
Just said
Nathan,
Zeb
you got
at
it
the
right.
same time. So.
Both of you got it right.
Yeah. I'm gonna give Martinez the point there because the viewers do run on a delay. So Martinez did win the day on that.
It's fine.
2-1.
My next guess was.
It finishes up at, and we've got to end the show now. We'll be back again tomorrow. Same time, same place, 11 o'clock UTC PM. That would be, 6 on the East Coast? Yeah, 6 on the East Coast. And until then, look forward to it. Part 5, the final part of the main feature, sort of, and then we do our results show on Saturday, and it's all going to be a bit of fun on Saturday. We've got a few things to show you on there as well, including the Team Hypo. People who like the hypothetical hurricane seasons might look forward to that.
Oh God.
So we've got that yet to come, and if there's any, whilst I'm on the subject, if there's anything from Force 13 that you've seen over the years that are your favourite moments, your favourite bits, request it and we might be able to show it on Saturday's show as well. But we've got Friday to get through yet. That's all from us tonight. We'll see you again soon. Thank you for joining us, everyone.
Thank you, Nathan, and thank you, everybody. See you tomorrow.
Have a great one. Stay
Thank
safe.
you. We'll be
Thank
back
you.
soon. Goodbye.